Hi, my name is Nick Moore, and today I'm going to be talking about BoJack Horseman, more specifically how he connects to both the phenomenological theory and the theory of existentialism. First, some background on BoJack himself. BoJack's early life had a direct correlation with how he grew up to be a dysfunctional adult. His mother, Beatrice, was cold and always seemed to have a resentful attitude towards him. She ended up passing down unresolved trauma and a lot of her bitterness to BoJack. BoJack's father was not much better. He was verbally and emotionally abusive towards both his son and his wife. He was an alcoholic and often looked at life joylessly, which BoJack seemed to inherit. BoJack idolized the racehorse secretariat at a young age, as he was an escape from his chaotic household, and his unconscious perceived him as more of a father figure than his own father. Secretariat's advice of run straight ahead and keep running forward resonated deeply with BoJack. Secretariat's words can be seen as a parallel to BoJack's inability to face his problems later in life. So it's safe to say that BoJack grew up in a toxic, cruel, and unforgiving household. Later on in life, he managed to find fame at a young age, starring in the 90s sitcom Horsin' Around. This brought him no personal fulfillment, however, only monetary gain. But fast forward around 30 years later, and the titular main character of BoJack Horseman is washed up and substance abuser. Horseman's intergenerational trauma and emotionally barren upbringing propelled him into a life where he is now someone who is constantly battling with meaning, freedom, and the consequences of his own actions. He struggles to maintain relationships due to the fact that he has a fear of intimacy and vulnerability. BoJack also suffers from depression and low self-esteem, as well as some moments of suicidal ideation. As I have mentioned, BoJack did not have the greatest childhood. Consequently, he did not have the greatest adulthood either. First theory that I'm going to be discussing in relationship to BoJack Horseman, the show, is the phenomenological theory, of which Edward Husserl is a main proponent. The core idea of phenomenological theory is how an individual interprets the world around them from their own viewpoint. BoJack's view of the world is entirely shaped by his troubled early developmental trauma. His early life was filled with deep insecurity and many instances of trauma. This was the catalyst for his inability later on to make relationships, as he still holds a fear of rejection and believes the world to be cruel. My second theory that I will touch upon in regard to Mr. Horseman is the theory of existentialism. Existentialism emphasizes that an individual begins the search for meaning in life. It emphasizes freedom and choice. One of the major proponents of existentialism is Friedrich Nietzsche. BoJack can be described as almost a parallel to existentialism. He constantly feels lost throughout the show, maintaining the attitude that he will not find his purpose in life, and that he thinks he is truly incapable of changing himself for the better. He is often seen not being able to take responsibility for his actions, and responsibility is a main point of existentialism. The relationship between the two theories that helps the viewer understand what makes BoJack tick and how he ends up being a somehow likable character throughout the show despite his less than heroic actions. It explains his feelings. Phenomenological theory explains his feelings. It explains the why of BoJack, the reason for his actions, brings to light the repressed emotions, and it allows him to create purpose in a world that to him seems utterly meaningless. He holds the key to his own freedom in a sense. Married together, these two theories show an individual who is being torn in half by his deep-seated pain and trauma, as well as the fear-inducing horizon of personal transformation. However, both of these theories contain their own specific drawbacks and limitations. Both theories only provide reasons as to why BoJack acts the way he does, but neither of them provide answers as to how to help him. They can point out all the things that are wrong with him, but not aid in his recovery. The psychological tools that he would need, such as therapy or support, they are not touched on in these theories. Phenomenological theory only touches on the internal side of BoJack's problems and neglects the external factors that could also play a part in his worldview. Existentialism can also oversimplify BoJack's issues. The theory can suggest BoJack can just suddenly change his outlook and find his true purpose, which can seem daunting for someone who is as emotionally unequipped as our equine protagonist. In regard to social justice and multicultural implications, these two theories that I've selected to paint a picture of BoJack's inner machinations are not considerate of how many different cultural aspects there are. Phenomenological theory can sometimes overlook how culture can shape perception and identity. Different cultures could have variations on what constitutes growth or what can be seen as trauma. The implications of existentialism are that it can promote freedom and personal responsibility, whereas some cultures promote tradition or duty over one's individual choices. In conclusion, BoJack Horseman is an apt fictional character to bring up when discussing phenomenological theory and existentialism. His journey to find meaning and take responsibility throughout the entire show is a well brought up topic, and the theme of his life suffering is evident throughout flashbacks that take throughout the show. To me, I believe he embodies phenomenological theory as its main point is that your worldview is shaped by your perspective and your lived experiences. Bojack could have turned out a whole lot differently had he not endured trauma or bitterness surrounding him throughout his childhood. Bojack is also perfect for existentialism as he grapples with his true purpose during the entire run of the show. Thank you.